I don't know, hundreds of people who have bought businesses. You make sure you buy a lot of trust with your employees, and you ensure that you take care of your employees such that they take care of your customers. I own all of the external, so I only do acquisitions, strategy, that type of stuff. Everything internal. Yeah.
Guys, we got another episode of One Network here. I got Reg Zeller with me. He's the CEO of CaneKast, a serial entrepreneur. He got a podcast himself, very big in the manufacturing space. I was just talking here before we got started about, kind of the different entrepreneurs that we have in the One Network and the types of businesses they want run. I think Reg has like a very interesting story and background as far as like his space and niche that he's in, and I want our audience to hear it. So Reg, can you just give like a quick background on yourself? Like, how did you become, if we could go all the way back, you know what I'm saying, to the beginning of the journey? How did you get started in the first place?
Yeah, let the old guy talk. I get it. So small town kid, loved to tinker, loved math, went into engineering as an undergrad, jumped through 4 different corporate environments, all manufacturing based. So Rockwell Automation, Honeywell, Schneider Electric, and GE. And through that, picked up pretty much everything you can imagine from different parts of roles. So everything, I didn't do technically sales and I didn't do HR or finance, but I think I touched pretty much every other role in corporate America. So really just got sick of doing that and wanted to do my own thing, wanted to add some value, and had realized that we were sending a lot of manufacturing overseas. Thought that this might be a play that we could make, would be getting folks in to say, yeah, we're going to make small US-based manufacturing a thing again. I think that it's kind of fundamental to our country. I think COVID, obviously this was pre-COVID, this was 7.5 years ago now. So people weren't really thinking about manufacturing. Generally speaking, I was told I was an idiot when I did get into manufacturing. Maybe still should be told that, who knows. But the goal for it was to say that if someone had an idea, they wanted to build a widget, they wanted to get something prototyped, they wanted to have something be able to be made, that's something that we have to be able to do here in the US. So that was kind of where this started. And then, I'm not one of those people that think it should be 100% US versus, I don't think it should be 100% overseas or any other country. Yeah. So I think you need to have a mix of both. I think there's reasons for all of them. And so you really need to go figure out, and that's what we're doing in a nutshell.
Nice. So I guess to get into like starting that company, like what are the, just for people who are unfamiliar, like what are some of the things that you have to do as far as like acquiring assets and just setting it up? Like what actually goes into that?
Yeah. So simplistically, we used an SBA loan. So what that amounts to, and there's very different versions depending on how you want to handle it. We did it all ourselves. So using the search terms, which I had no idea what the hell a searcher was, or ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition, or any of that was. If it did exist, I had no idea what it was. And so we just wrote out a small check, and now you can do it at 5-10% of the company's value, and you get an SBA loan for the rest. If you don't want to be self-funded and do it yourself, there's ways people get equity to go buy into these things. But then once you buy a company, typically, all really depends on the size and quality of the company. Anywhere from typically 2 to 4x the annual, what they call SDE, which think of seller discretionary earnings. Nothing more than, EBITDA plus owner's benefits, salary, cars, etc. But yeah, you buy it. Get in there, sit in the hot seat, and run it for a few years. And then after buying our first one, that again, we just brought some cash to the table. Bank gave us a loan plus a line of capital or a line of credit after that. And then we continued to buy. So we've purchased 7 of these things, all utilizing the cash that was generated from inside the business. We haven't put anything more than our initial amount in. And so, we funded. In total, we'll probably end up with I've not actually done this math until right now, $15 or $20 million, something like that, in in capital expenditures, and then over the next, or the first 10 years of the company, and probably, 15, and about that same amount in acquisitions of what it was. But, it was all just nothing more than at the initial time, a little more than 10%, call it 15% of the total company purchase. And everything else has just been growing the business and utilizing the cash that kicked off to continue to grow the rest of the enterprise.
Nice. So I guess you made it sound very like quick and easy there, but what like after you acquire that first business, on the SBA loan, like what are they profitable when you acquire them? Like what actually do you have to like put in place? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like what are those?
Yeah.
What does that phase look like?
Yeah. So initially, typically you have to qualify via profitability with the bank. They'll look at cash flows and pretty much your debt coverage ratio, more or less. Can you cover the amount of debt with also taking a salary out and living on it? So that is more or less a set formula that occurs. You have to provide them business plans, what you're going to do, et cetera. But really they look at, do you have the knowledge, the chops, if you will, and somewhat of a plan to go grow it. And normally people think they're going to come into this, especially in my space, these smaller companies. It'll just be simple. You just rip out the fax machine, put in some SEO and email campaigns, and sit back and watch the money just flow in, which doesn't tend to work quite that way. But generally speaking, it really amounts to, you just got to work day to day in the business. You got to learn the ins and outs of the industry. If you have employees, you got to get to know them. If you have to work through whatever it might be with your vendors, customers, it's really just figuring out the ins and outs of the cycles of the business, the people. And then the really hard thing come once you start to grow the business a lot. Because then you're building executive teams, you're replacing teams that weren't working, et cetera, et cetera. So always one thing after the next, it seems.
Nice. I guess so. A couple key questions. What you have any partners in the business, or do you bring anybody in on like an executive level?
Yeah. So I initially you own 100%. Everybody, no one else has brought money into the business per se. There will be equity partners, namely Josh, and there'll be a few other key executives that likely get equity in the business as well through earnouts and the work that they do. But yeah, as of right now, or as of when we started, I should say, my wife and I own 100%. She does her own thing. She helps out a little bit here and there, but she's a CEO of a private equity owned firm, and so she's got plenty on her plate. She doesn't have a whole lot of time to come help me, and so yeah. Then I've had to build out an entire executive team. So we've got a president and COO, Josh. We've got a CTO. We've got a head of sales. We got a head of ops. And then underneath them, we bought those 7 different businesses. They're spread all throughout the country. Then we have teams, that they've had to build out. So both locally in our facilities across the U.S., as well as the teams in the Philippines, Mexico, Argentina. I'm sure I'm missing something somewhere in there, but yeah. So we can run our entire organization totally remote, except for where we actually manufacture. That's the only place that people actually go in and deal with the day to day.
How do you approach hiring and firing and the whole human resources? Obviously, having all this teams in a different country, there's the front office, the back office, the actual foundry factory people.
Yeah. So everybody in our organization has a slightly different way of doing it, just from where and how they want to hire. I tend to be the very weird opposite version, where I just get to know people really well and then more or less get a gut feel. Once we do that, we put them through this thing called culture index, just to give them a decent idea of what their traits and behaviors are, both what they want to do and what they actually are. Just a good guiding. Anyone can do anything, but it just helps us explain a little bit. And so that last part of it is just really when we have that way of solving it, we just make sure that we hire ahead so that we're building out our team before we need it. Just to enable growth is really what it amounts to. But we've got a list we've got the formal processes, that type of stuff, using a company called Paylocity, and we've got all the forms to fill out, and that legal crap. But not getting into that. It's mainly people figuring out how to get good people. The old saying of hire great people, get them on the bus, and then figure out what seat they belong in is really our philosophy. So we just try and pack in as many good people as possible and go help and kind of say, normally we'll have at least two roles in our teams of like, hey, you're technically, you need to do this, but you also probably are going to need to pitch in and do this because this is what your background is or expertise or interests or whatever. So it's not, it's certainly not, tech startup level of craziness, but it's not far off. So we've got, we work a lot of hours, and when we grind through it, it's really, you grow. And then the interesting part is once you have all that growth, then you need to replace everything again, which is really tough.
Do you have like systems in place of like middle managers, and like how deep is like the organizational structure in just terms of managing different
Yep,
teams and companies?
absolutely. Yeah, so we've got, so the general structure, Josh is the only one who technically reports to me, although it's not really a reporting structure. I own all of the external, so I only do acquisitions, strategy, that type of stuff.
Top
Everything
level.
internal, yep, everything
Yeah.
internal is 100% Josh. So we just break
Okay.
it out into organic and inorganic, and then under Josh will have managers that would manage, let's say, all of our shared services. He'd have another manager that takes care of the technology, another manager that takes care of all of our plants. And then inside, let's say, of those, it might have the people who are doing customer service or engineering, or the folks that are actually working. And then inside of the facilities, there's a whole other hierarchy inside of there of, plant manager, team managers or team leads, and then folks doing the actual production work.
How, in terms of that relationship with Josh, like, did you always have like good communication? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you must be very comfortable
Yeah.
from a trust level to delegate like that. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yes. Yep. Absolutely. So Josh and I met. It's almost 3 years now, but it just amounted to, we were the two people on Twitter or X that were talking about manufacturing, and so he jumped in, and we'd had our prior president quit, so I was looking for someone to replace him with. He wanted to go do something else that was more interesting to him, and so we talked. I talked with Josh, and the simple story was we went through, and right from the beginning, I pinged him like, "Hey, would love to jump on a call. You're talking about the same things I'm talking about. You're the only one I see. I'm looking for someone. I know that that's not a role that you're looking for because you want to go do your own thing or something similar." And he wrote back with more or less a, yeah, I don't really do meetings. So how about I just ping you when I'm free next week during one of these days? And if you're available, awesome. And if not, then you ping me, a few days later or whatever. And if it's been like a couple of weeks we haven't connected, then we'll schedule something formal. And I was like, this is awesome. Like, I am not a meeting guy. I mean, to give you an idea, I literally have 1 2 hour meeting a month. And beyond that, Josh and I just talk whenever we need to, and that's the extent of it. So yeah, we quickly, I flew him up to where I live in Minneapolis. He's in Austin, Texas. He spent a weekend with me. More or less was, he went back, and I was like, I wonder when he's going to get back to me about if he's going to take this role. And my wife said, well, did you technically offer him the role? And I was like, I mean, he knew that. Like, like, I was just up here to make sure he wanted to do this. And so I told him exactly that. He's like, oh yeah. He's like, yeah, I'm totally in. So yeah, and now it's a running joke that I speak Josh. So when he like voice to text, like the random things or whatever, like I have a better idea of what Josh is saying than his wife typically does, I think, and vice versa. And I definitely spend more time on the phone with Josh than I ever would with my wife or anybody else, probably all combined.
That's cool. That's hilarious. Um, cool. What are like some of the key issues that you deal with as like an entrepreneur on a daily basis?
Yeah.
Key hassles.
Yeah, I mean, customers and employees are the obvious two. I mean, that's what you got to go do, right? I mean, everything, and that isn't even a hassle. That's just the name of the game. So you need to get great employees, And then you need to make sure that those great employees are taking care of the customers. I mean, that's really what it amounts to. The rest of it is the grind that you have to get through. So especially in manufacturing, it's very working capital intensive between both growth. If you have 30, 45-day pay terms for customers plus CapEx. So for
You got to
us,
finance everything, kind of.
yeah, exactly. So finding your capital float, figuring out how to make that work, it's really hard. SBA gets you part of the way there, but you know, much over $5 million. Now there's some things where you can go to get 7, 8, $9 million. But if you go to become a 30, 50, $100 million company, just the working capital that tears up in order to do it. And I assume, or if your audience doesn't, I won't assume that is, what you need to pay for your employees, your inventory, and then ultimately what that looks like is you'll build up a bunch of accounts payable. You'll also have accounts receivable. And so funding that difference between, when you're actually getting, let's say, EBITDA, or when the profit goes to the bottom line versus when you actually get paid is very different. So you're paying out a lot of money in advance. You're receiving that money 30 or 60 days after you started either paying your employees or purchasing your materials, and you got to float all that. So what it takes when you're floating at 3 million versus 30 million is a whole other animal. I mean, and if you read like Shoe Dog is one of my favorite business books imaginable. You can watch Phil Knight go through the same thing where he had to bet the company time after time after time and go beg, borrow, and plead for money forever. And until you get to 5 million plus in EBITDA, you don't have an option like that. Until you can get traditional financing, you just got to scrape together and figure it out and solve it however you can.
Did you ever have like a big crunch? Like I'm saying, like with all those issues
Oh yeah,
combined.
all the time,
Tell me about that.
all the time. Yeah, I mean, it's been. I mean, so the first 6 months were great. The last 7 years have practically been one knife fight after the next. Just because if you plateau and stop growth, you're fine. But as long as you're growing, you constantly need to find the money to do that. There's no other way. So there's scary times. I mean, I'm practically known for, if you search my name on X or Google it or whatever, it pops up with this fetal position story that I love to tell. Which 18 months in, 15 months in, whenever it was, we had to buy a piece of equipment. It was broken. Had no idea what was going on, and literally found myself catastrophizing everything, thinking we were definitely going to go bankrupt. And the last 10 plus years of what my wife and I have worked on and everything else was all going to go up in flames, and we are going to go bankrupt. So literally found myself 3 a.m. on the bathroom floor, like not able to function. And what you do is you literally, you can either sit there and wallow, or you do what I did, which is you take a shower, and instead of sleeping anymore, you go to work and you go figure out what you can do to help solve that.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's people are gonna resonate with that one. But especially, if they're early on in the story, right? They got like, a lot more of those moments to come.
I tell everybody, expect the first 18 months to be hell. It just, I mean, you'll get a few, like, especially if you buy something or start something, you get a few months, a little bit of a honeymoon period, not a big deal. Everything feels fine, and then just the bottom falls out on you. And everybody, it's funny because I don't know, hundreds of people who have bought businesses, and the number that have actually never had those downturns and never worried about that, I can count on one hand, and probably don't even need one hand. I think partly the people that tell me that are lying, in that they didn't have those same problems, because everybody that I know really well has definitely been there. And you're like, oh no, what happened?
Yeah. Okay, so what you were talking about an acquisition that you did recently. Like now 7 years in, like what what I'm saying, or how 8 years in, what are the objectives? Like what are some of the things you're trying to accomplish? I know you're talking about before the podcast some of those goals or objectives over the next 5 years.
So we're building out a coast to coast nationwide network of non-ferrous foundries. All that just means use aluminum foundries for lack of a more sophisticated term. But what it amounts to is we just need to get close to our customers and have the ability to serve small customers and or large customers. And that's what we do. So we can build, we can have 500,000, 700,000 million square feet, but it'll be spread out in 10, 12, 15 locations. So rather than having to be in one place, now we can be closer, we can de-risk, we can do a lot of different things. That brings with it a whole host of issues I'll mention in a second. But the goal is really, once we're done with this, and done meaning it's set on a pace where I can turn over the acquisition engine to somebody else for foundries, we'll go do this in another 2, 3, 4, 5 small manufacturing roll-ups. So I couldn't tell you exactly what industries those will be in or how exactly that'll be, but it will be something along ultimately a small manufacturing bent and or the enabling industries, services, etc. Because that's what this company CaneKast is built on, and then there'll be another holding company over the top. But ultimately, this is so my wife and I don't have kids. Ultimately, everything will go into an irrevocable trust, and it will be based. It won't be able to be sold, and essentially, it will just live on as an enduringly private company that focuses on small manufacturing, until the rest of time, and or it goes bankrupt and goes away. I'm not sure which, but hopefully that doesn't occur. But yeah, and then the hard part about it is managing one when you're sitting in the seat and you can go visit it every day, you're local, etc. That's one thing. Managing 7 or 10 or 15 when you have zero control is a completely different animal, not just from the people aspect, but from the systems and processes and all that. And that's really been the really hard part the last 5 years, is trying to get that through. And that's what we've been grinding through and building our playbooks out the last 2 or 3 years, such that rather than being able to do 1 or 2 acquisitions a year, we can do 1 or 2 acquisitions a quarter. And that's really ultimately what we're now at and where we are. We kind of built the last of that playbook out, we think, on this last acquisition. We've done smaller acquisitions. This was the largest acquisition we've done. And like I mentioned to you, we've 10x the first 7+ years. And we're going to go double that in the next 1 or 2. And in total, probably 5x that out of the next 3 or 4 or 5. And that growth with hiring people and getting enough people on board and getting the capital equipment and getting everything done is just, it's a logistical and work nightmare. But yeah, that's the goal, and how the hard work we're gonna have to do to get there.
Nice. Any lessons that you learned in the last however many years journeying, like, that you would want to impart on somebody who's like considering taking the dive, maybe taking an SBA to buy a business, or like
I mean, either
20 years?
Yeah, it doesn't matter whether you start or buy. Either way, a lot of them are the same. If you're buying, it's a little different. You're not working under, ultimately a leverage cloud where you're having to pay a bank back. But there you're going to have to go generate revenue really fast. So unless you have the money to float yourself. So I think it's the exact same thing, in that you make sure you buy a lot of trust with your employees, and you ensure that you take care of your employees such that they take care of your customers. That's the easy answer. And then typically, if you're brand new your first time, you haven't done it in specifically the industry and the platform you're buying into, then don't change things. The first typically 30, 60, 90 days, you're going to have to learn. I hear people all the time say, I'll tell the exact same story actually for us. We went from a all landline system to all voice over IP, and that disabled our fax machine, which I didn't even know that we had a fax machine, much less that it worked. And a customer showed up, was like, "Hey, where are my parts?" And I was like, "We didn't get anything from you." And he was like, "Yeah, I sent it like 4 months ago saying I need these. I faxed it to you." And I was like, "We have a fax machine?" So it's stuff like that. And that was not even on purpose, but there's other things you just have to learn the industry and the people before you start ripping stuff out. Now, 7 acquisitions and 7 years in, it's a totally different animal. We typically buy more turnaround type shops. And so when we jump in and buy a business now, we immediately put in what we have to take. I mean, we'll do the inside of due diligence. We'll figure out exactly what we need to change, how we need to change it before we even buy it. And on day one, we'll start fixing everything we need. We won't wait any amount of time, just because we know the systems and the processes and how to do it. And we need to impart that very quickly.
Nice. Kind of bonus question here, Reg. Any like business authors or influencers or people who you follow or take advice from?
Yeah, so I am not a business book guy. I'm a biography guy. I think the vast majority of those, you can sum up all of their bullshit in like 7 sentences,
Yeah.
and it's all the same advice packaged different ways. I think you'll learn far more reading about the history. Like I mentioned, Shoe Dog. I think that's an incredible book. I think if you go find, I listened to two. I would say the biggest thing I listen to, partly down that line, is both Acquired and Founders, the two podcasts where they talk about here's what's happened either in the business or in the individual people. That is far more informative than, oh, here, use this 6 letter acronym to turn around your company in 90 days or whatever it might be. I think there's the technical knowledge you need to get. If you're in manufacturing, it's lean and Kaizen and some of that. If you're in something that's sales, great, then go learn some of that about the sales things. But how to actually run in the fundamentals, foundations of companies, I don't think hardly anything has changed in the last 100 years. Like I learned much more reading stuff about what Andrew Carnegie or Rockefeller or JP Morgan or what those guys did back, 100 years ago or whatever, than I do about the latest guru's book on whatever it might be. So yeah, I'm I'm a history guy. I think that you can learn a lot more from history than you can from someone that's gone through. But I love war stories.
Same. Yeah. That's cool. Cool, Reg, man. Where can people find you and like follow you? I don't know if you do coaching or any type of content.
Yeah, so I help.
Related to
No, I mean, yeah, we just try and help people. So we talk about building in public. We do the best we can as we come across things, and partly it's that I forget what it was like 7 years ago. So try and help out as many people. We've developed local groups, not just me, there's a lot of people. So there's a whole SMB Twitter or SMBX community, similar with, I'm not nearly as active on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is all my old corporate people that I know. So there's way too many. Those people get bored and would hate that. But we just try and build, just talk about what it's really like in public on Twitter and saying, hey, here's what it's like, here's what it's not like. And then I'm trying to do anything imaginable. We've done a few different manufacturing events. So at Reg Zeller on Twitter, I think it's the same, whatever, the same Reg Zeller on LinkedIn. But yeah, it's Josh and I are trying to do everything we can to help and build this community, and especially around manufacturing, anything we can do to help. We talk to a lot of folks, and a lot of people have helped me get here. So I'm trying to help a lot of folks to pay that ahead again.
Got it. Cool. Reg, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Of course. Appreciate it. Take care.
Good stuff. Swan Network.
Pip squeak, pipe down. You ain't in no big three. Scissor got you wiped down. Travis got you wiped down. Savage got you wiped down. Like your label, boy, you in a scope.